And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Reverend Z over here.
And this is New Thought Today, a weekly exploration, if you will, of the principles of New Thought. How applicable are they to our lives today? How can we use them? How can we put them into place? All that kind of good old stuff. So we want to catch you up a little bit on what we've got going on, and we've got some great announcements today. We've got our first very special guest coming next week. So we'll make that announcement a little bit later, let you know who that's going to be. But today, what we want to start with is just a real quick overview and recap of what we've covered so far. Now, again, this is an exploration of New Thought principles, and as religious science ministers, we bring that bias to the game, if you will. We bring that influence to the game. But both Z and I also, and how that intersects with science of mind, New Thought, and the New Thought philosophy. But this program, what we're doing is we're taking a look at the global vision by the Centers for Spiritual Living. We've been at it for a couple weeks, and we've got a whole bunch of weeks left in front of us. And so far, the ground we've kind of covered is that we envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. And we see a world in which each and every person lives in alignment with his or her highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. And what we're looking at today is the third statement in the series of 10. We envision humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought. A world where each and every person discovers his, her own personal power and ability to create an individual life that works within a world that works for everyone. So, Z, welcome back. Good afternoon. Good to see you again, my friend.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Glad to be here to delve deep into these life-saving, I say, visionary statements of how we can begin to live a more in sync and more fluid life in line with the Most High God.
Right on. Absolutely. And we do want to say hello to Ronald. Good afternoon, Ronald Williams. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, sir. Glad that you are with us here live. Now, we recognize not everybody can be with us live, and we recognize that many of you are probably watching this at another time, perhaps sitting around waiting for something else to happen, and that's okay. Please still feel free to share your comments in the comment box. We will make sure that we respond to those, whether you get them right now or whether we get them in 10 days from now or anytime in between. We'll keep responding, because the intention here is for this to be an interactive program as much
Yeah.
as possible.
Yep.
This isn't just the two of us sitting here telling you what to think. This is the two of us inviting you into a dialogue around, well, what do we think?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we use those thoughts to further our enjoyment of the day, our advancement of our careers, our lives, what we really are about. So
Yes.
I feel like I'm
Yeah.
getting off track already, Z.
That's all right. That's all right. It's all track. It's all on the same track because the one thing we're looking at here in this third statement, we envision humanity's awakening to spiritual magnificence. I think is a great place to start. In that, as you was bringing the show on the air, I had this thought where I said, this process of awakening is very similar in my mind to a caterpillar becoming a butterfly.
Mhm.
Because the caterpillar at one point, right, it has its way of living, it has its own certain powers, it knows how to engage with this environment very successfully. But the purpose of that caterpillar is to transform and awaken to the nature, the spirit, the understanding, and the skill set of a butterfly. And then once that happens, if you will, if we use that metaphor, now the butterfly can articulate and relate to living on earth as well as living in the sky. So his perspective, or its perspective, has grown exponentially at that point, and it is ready to begin or to fully embrace the spiritual magnificence of a being that has lived in two worlds, if you will, has a great perspective, and can share that with others to uplift them to their butterflyness, if you will,
Yeah.
at any given moment.
Yes, to our butterfly. Here is to our butterflyness. And, folks, part of what Z is talking about here right now is the we all exist and live on a spiral. This is one of the things that we hold to very strongly. We all live on a spiral. And as we make our way through life, we're moving upward and outward at the same time. And in that, that means there are going to be experiences where we can look back and see, well, what did I do the last time I was here? Because this is an awful lot like what happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Or
Right.
didn't I just do this with somebody about 6 months? We make those circles and we make those expansions, and then we're able to look back and say, hey, I'm awakening
Yeah.
to the fact that I have an opportunity to do this differently than I did last time.
Yes. Yes. And
Creating, go ahead,
no,
sir.
go ahead, bro.
I was just gonna say, I'm creating a new outcome to an existing event, to something that already happened that I've already been down the road of, and we get to create a new outcome based on looking at it from it differently.
Right, right. And that's so apropos. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday when we were looking at this whole idea of awakening to our spiritual magnificence, and looked at that from an evolutionary process, we talked about, this spiral of life that goes around and around, and even if it's only 0.001 the second time around, it's a little higher, if you will, in degree than the circle we did before. And so as you continue to make these evolutionary revolutions around the circle of life, each one gets us a little up the scale, and we begin to see the world differently. And so the world I see at point 1.0 is very different from the world I see at 0.0.
Right.
And that just speaks to the awakening process. Each one of these revolutions around the sun, as I say, for your birthday or however you want to look at it, it spirals around, and we come back the next year at 1.0 or 40.0. We see differently. We have a different perspective of the world, and that is the awakening evolutionary process to our spiritual magnificence rather, that's happening every day for each and every one of us.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. And we awaken to that each in our own ways and in our own time. So you've heard us talk about this on this program before, or if you haven't, check out the archives. But we talk about the fact that in all of this, our work is to transcend our current existence, our current reality, transcend that into something new, but also be sure to include a helping hand to those that aren't quite at the understanding that we are. So we transcend our current existence, but we include everything that got us to this, and we
Yes.
can reach back down the spiral and say, "Hey, I see you're having a little bit of trouble there. I've traveled that road before. I can support you in moving beyond that experience." Now, we can't force that on people. That's not allowing people, that's not supporting people in awakening to their own spiritual magnificence. That's forcing upon them our own belief. We have to offer the help and allow for people their process of awakening.
Yeah, yeah, and I read this thing. We talked about this yesterday. This concept, phrase, however you want to articulate it, in this book called The Power of Idea. It reads like this. I think it sums it up so apropos. It says evolution is awakening. Evolution is realizing what already is present.
Right.
Our whole process of evolution is the gradual awakening to something which already exists as a potential in the universe. And
Hmm.
so that's what this whole uh process is about, is to awakening to things that have already been placed before us by the divine mind of God, and that as we evolve into a higher level of consciousness, we begin to see things that have already been there. And I'm sure this story has been heard before, but electricity existed from time immemorial before it was actually codified and locked down and put into a principle. It was already there, but we had to evolve to the level of understanding and application to prove the point, do it consistently so that we can say this is a law, the law of electricity. And that's what we're looking to do here in New Thought and Religious Science specifically, is to look at the universal laws that are extracted out of these principles so that we can begin to evolve into our spiritual magnificence, which is a grand and glorious thing when we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to give everybody a quick example of that from my own life, from my experience. When I first found all this stuff, way back, way back, 2001, and when I first found all of this, I wasn't exactly looking for anything different. I thought I had it pretty well together. In the past 20 years, my life has broken down enough for me to realize I didn't. And now it's all back together again. And now it's feeling pretty good again. Uh, Point being, at that time, I had a tendency to use the word hate an awful lot. And it was just part of my language. And it was through this philosophy and through the awakening that I experienced in this philosophy that I came to realize the vibration that I was casting out into the world by hating this and hating that and hating this guy and hating that girl and all of it. Now, it wasn't exactly the easiest thing to change that habit, and yet uh, it did. I was able to change that habit fairly, I always say fairly quickly. But
Mm-hmm.
what I had to do is I had to start a habit of reminding myself whenever I heard that word that no, that's not the truth. Now, this is pretty classic science of mind stuff. You hear something that's not the truth, you say that it's not the truth. And when you claim that something's not the truth, then you follow it up by saying what the truth is.
Right.
So in my conversations, it would sound like I would say, and so I hate such. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Please allow me to reframe that because that's too strong of a word. What I meant was I have a very intense dislike for this. And an intense dislike became just a dislike, and a dislike just became an annoyance. And eventually, I was able to let go of all of the words that triggered some adverse vibration within myself.
Right.
And now, well, it is what it is. I can choose to get all upset about it, or I can choose to say, hey, it is what it is. What can I do to move my life back on track, to move back into where I really want to be?
And that's so apropos, because it moves us to the second part of this statement, or the second emphatic point, and that is, once you awaken to this spiritual magnificence, then the whole idea of discovering the creative power of thought, discovering the creative power of thought, because there is nothing, I would submit, in the whole world that you can identify that we use today that did not start first as a thought in somebody's mind. It was an idea, it was a picture, it was a thought that came forth. And just like it says in the Bible, and then the word took on flesh, and then that thought, that idea took on flesh. It began to evolve to its spiritual magnificence, if you will, to manifest as it was intended to be. And
Right.
so, from that standpoint, it's exactly what you were just saying, Robert. We begin to, once we understand this spiritual magnificence of our everyday life, Then we begin to understand that our thoughts and our ideas are creative and that they build structures, and that just like any other habit, for all of us who have some kind of physical activity, no matter what it is, running, skiing, swimming, jump roping, whatever, we know through habit, if we continue to do it, we get better and better. And that thing becomes harder and harder to move away from. So now imagine in your mind, as Robert was saying, you keep making these statements. At first, they're just statements, they seem, but then they begin to attract some gravity, if you will, and they become weighted down. And then before you know it, it's a habit. You find yourself saying these words or having these thoughts or doing these reactions to people's behavior, all based on the idea that you were not able to reconcile and put it in its proper place, knowing that as a spiritual, magnificent being, you have the power to co-create with the divine through the power of your thought.
Yes. And not only do you have the ability, but I would say you have the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You have you have that responsibility to be in creative, co-creative partnership with the divine,
Yes.
to be an outlet through which the divine brings forth the forms of our lives, the experiences of our lives. Uh, as ministers, we say there's all kinds of things we talk about with ourselves and each other, and especially when things look a little dark. And one of the greatest reminders my colleagues give me all the time is you never really know who you have touched and how you have served their lives. And
Yep.
there are countless people, and we can all point to stories, and there are countless people whose lives have been touched by this philosophy that have never told the minister or the practitioner or just the person who shared the idea with them how much it really did affect and move and change their lives and support them. And really, all of this work is about opening up to that truth for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And the thing that I like is in this whole idea of the power of thought or the power in spoken word. Um, there's a tribe in Africa called the Dogon, and I'm sure some of you may have heard of it. And they have this concept of the power of nomo, and nomo is effectively the word or the idea. And they have this concept that there's the word in front of the word, there's the word behind the word, and then there's the word on both sides of the word. That gives you this holistic picture, is that there is no independent thought. All thoughts are backed up, supported by, and held in place, if you will, by other thoughts that we've had in our lifetimes. And so when a certain thought or idea or word is projected, it resonates, and all things like it begin to coalesce together, if you will. And so we look at this idea of understanding this creative power, that a thought is creative, and then we begin to say, okay, well, how do I cultivate it? Just like we plant a seed or plant suckling, we look at, now that I've come up with this thing and planted it, how do I support it? How do I support the creative mind to think and act in a divine way? And we know there's some ways. There's prayer, of course. There's contemplation. There's meditation. There's journaling. There's even songwriting. Anything that begins to take that idea and create a picture in your mind that you can project forward
mhm.
into reality.
Yeah,
That's when you begin to really see the spiritual magnificence of who each and every one of us are.
yeah. Hmm. Yes, 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 yes. I love it. Folks, we blow right past the commercial breaks in this show because we're having so much fun. But, Fiona says it also, right? Our thoughts create structures.
Yes.
They create structures first in our mind and in our consciousness, and then we're able to witness those structures out into the world. And so we're going to, take that a moment here to take a break and say thank you. Thank you to the New Thought Media Network for making this a possible. Thank you for those of you that are watching now live and those that are watching at another time for making this possible. The entire idea behind New Thought Media Network is to create a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment.
Yeah.
So when Elzia says even songwriters,
Mhm.
we're going to forgive him for that, right? Because we're all about the positive vibration of song and music around this place. And you can check that over on our radio station, New Thought Radio. But the point we want to get to there is not only to say thank you to New Thought Media Network, but to express a moment of gratitude for what it's taken to create this network and what it's going to take to create this network moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no question that this is a divine ideal in the mind of God. And there's no question that there's a small group of committed individuals coming together to make this happen. And we want to see that commitment grow. We want to see that group of individuals grow, whether as a listener or a viewer or as someone that wants to get involved in the back office and make all of this happen and do the work behind the scenes. If you do have any interest in becoming a part of all this, please shoot us an email, info@newthoughtntmedia.org. That's info@ntmedia.org. And we'll make sure that we get you with the right people. So, okay, Z.
Well, I'm gonna throw up my hands. I didn't mean to call out those songwriters because I'm a frustrated musician myself. I used to play sax and clarinet, and I did a little bit of singing too back in the day. But I I I wanted to get that in because there's one thing about the thoughts and ideas that come in music,
Yeah.
specifically, I think only in music, is in the music, in addition to a song or even a poem, which is just a song without music, right? The ability to create an image in your mind is number one. But when you add the music behind those lyrics that allows the frequency or the rhythm of life to be activated within us, then we really can get involved in this thing of creative thought and how our words have power and how we begin to display and activate our our spiritual magnificence.
Yeah.
and and
Uh,
and that's when we each and every one can begin to operate from that kind of a premise or basis wherever you find yourself on that scale. Then of course, I'm going to give the sorry metaphor. Then we can begin to make beautiful music, right? I said, oh God, you didn't go there. Yes, I did. Then we can make beautiful music together because we begin to activate and bounce off of each other's spiritual magnificence to create this symphony of life.
yes. See, the symphony of life. You pulled it back together there at the end, brother. Thank you. It, and this is part of it, right, folks? We have to be willing to bring our authentic self to the party. If we're all just trying to be clones and copies of each other, that's no fun. We're here, we're expressing our spiritual magnificence, and we're learning how to use our power.
Mhm.
We talked about this last week, right? Most people, when they're first introduced to this philosophy, to these belief patterns, to this, it's easy to go out and demonstrate to ourselves that we can do this work by demonstrating and manifesting parking places, princes, and palaces. You need a parking spot and one appears. You need, you're looking for the love of your life. You're looking for new housing. You're looking for a new job. I said this in a conversation earlier today. Most people that walk into a religious science church are incredibly broken. Not the way we see them, but the way they see themselves. And we start by getting our own house in order. But as we learn how to use these principles and we really learn how to really demonstrate, it becomes pretty obvious that getting the material stuff just doesn't have the it's not the shiny thing to get anymore.
Mhm.
It's not about how much of this or how many of those, or do I have the nicest watch, or do I have the you know, it's about creating, it's about serving humanity. It's about being part of this one global family that we're all a part of. It's about contributing in some way. And if if it feels tough to say, "Oh, I don't have anything to contribute," well, that's what we're part of. That's part of why we're here.
Right, right.
Hang out
And
long enough. Hang out long enough, and we will convince you of your own magnificence.
yes. And that leads to the third point in that statement, right?
Right.
That says, one the first thing is, once we awaken to our spiritual magnificence and we understand and discover the creative power of thought, then we begin to work on that next piece, a world where each and every person discovers his or her own personal power and ability to create an individual life that works within the greater life. Now that's a mouthful, I know, right? But once you understand your spiritual magnificence and you begin to understand and train and create the habit of having creative thoughts, then you can, as Robert was just saying, you can step into your own individual authentic self. Because again, I love the metaphor of the symphony. If I'm playing the drums and you're playing the tuba, then we got two different things we bring into the symphony of life. And if I try to hit the rhythms and pitter patters of the drum, or I guess I was playing the drum, or hit the notes of the tuba, and the tuba tries to do the drum thing, it's going to be a little out of whack. But
Yeah.
once we understand the spiritual magnificence of the drum and the tuba, if you will, then we can begin to not only activate and actualize our individual selves, but we also give everyone else the permission to be themselves. And no matter where they fit in the symphony, they understand, I understand, you understand that without that one thing, the symphony is no longer a symphony.
Right.
It's a combo
Exactly.
or whatever.
Yes. Absolutely. So that brings us to that point. Every single one of us is absolutely vital and necessary to the creation of a world that works for everyone. Because that's a really big thing. If you just dive into that statement for a minute or two, a world that works for everyone. And right now, there are countless people around the globe that think the world doesn't work for them. And here in America on November 4th, there's going to be a whole nother set of people, no matter what happens, no matter whose side you're on, no matter what the outcome, there are going to be people that think,
Oh,
there's going to be people that say this stuff doesn't work. It didn't work for me. I prayed for my candidate to win and it didn't work. I prayed for my football team, my baseball team to work and it didn't work. And it didn't happen. It didn't work. There will always be those um, opportunities to look and recognize, if it appears that something isn't working in my life, then there's something of a higher order that is working.
yeah, yeah.
There has to be.
And the interesting thing about that, that we talk about these spiritual principles and out of them we extract these laws. Well, there's this law called the law of polarity. And the law of polarity says that within any given thing, there is an ebb and flow. There is a polarity within that thing. And so when we can find ourselves finely tuned within that polarity, we can have what we call high lows. Because life is a flow. Excuse me. We're going to always have high tides and low tides because that's just by definition a part of the flow. But what we don't want to get is these big swings on that spectrum of polarity, and we go from one exaggeration or one extreme to the other. So we don't want that. We want our lows to be high lows. We want to find a sweet spot where our frequency is, where our best stuff is being displayed, and then begin to expand, to understand that at some point I can begin to increase the frequency and make it bigger, but still keep it stable and steady. And that's what we're looking to do, is to expand that spiritual idea, expand the spiritual consciousness of each and every one of us, so that we begin to set a frequency that is on point vibration. And I guess, one way to say it, I may be dating myself a little bit here. There used to be a commercial with Ella Fitzgerald and Memorex tapes, right? And Ella Fitzgerald would sing this high note, and she would hit the high C, and the wine glass would shatter, just demonstrating the power of resonance based on a note. Or, if we put it in human terms, based on the spiritual vibration and frequency that we are displaying and that we are putting out, based on our spiritual magnificence and our understanding of the power of the creative thought. Now I can stand in any symphony, whether I got a solo or I'm just playing in the background, I can get it done and be smiling the whole time.
Exactly. And that, right, that leads to part of the conversation. Are we not should Why are we not smiling all the time? Excuse me, in every situation. We'll get to that. That's a bigger conversation. That's going
Yes.
to take us way too far off track today. Um, but I did want to say there that, um, yes, it was always tough to tell if it was live or if it was Memorex. But personally, I was more of a Maxell XL Gold guy, and yeah, the dude in the chair with the single speaker, just yeah, that was.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, we're allowed to digress here a little bit, folks, and we're allowed to do shout outs and let our friends, our good friends, know that we know you're here and watching. Thank you. High praise from Tracy Brown. I believe came in while you were speaking there, Z. So I'll trust. High praise there. Thank you, Tracy, for being with us and for checking in today. You know, folks, this whole thing is really in a big project. When Z and I started talking about this program, we looked at the fact that there's 10 statements in this thing called the global vision. And we didn't feel it would be right to try to do just an hour or a couple hours and explain what this is and that's why we're doing in depth.
Yeah.
And we're spending a full episode on each of these different experiences, each of these different statements, and we're going to be including some guest speakers and some guests and to come in and share with us as well. And that's part of what's going to happen next week. So, as we've been kind of chatting, if you're just joining us on the conversation, first off, thanks to New Thought Media Network for making all this happen. And secondly, we want to let you know that we've got a longer term plan for this conversation. This week, we're talking about, and we're calling them principles. We're talking on the third principle here. Next week, our dear friend from out of New Jersey, Rev Jersey Girl, also known as the Reverend Dr. Michelle Wadley, is going to be joining us here on this program. She'll be with us live on Tuesday afternoon. Remember, we're here Tuesdays at 2 Mountain Time. She's going to be joining us, and we're going to do a recap of the first three principles, the first three parts that we're talking about. So if you missed the first couple episodes and you don't have time to go back and check them out in the archives, then make sure you catch up with us next week, or plan to spend some time with the recording next week, because we're going to go over all this again, and we're going to do it with another perspective. We're going to bring in another idea. Down
Right.
the road, we'll continue in that sort of vein, where on occasion we will bring in a special guest. Seeing as how you're on the program, Tracy Brown, consider yourself invited. You know how to find me. Reach out. We'd love to have you on as a guest. And so periodically we'll have people come in to kind of recap and go over these experiences, these principles, and share with you how it works in their life.
That's the key. That's
Because
the key.
this is really what it's all about, is making sure that we can activate these things, that we can actualize them, that we can use them in our
Yes.
lives.
Yes. Because as they say, you know, I can have the greatest toolkit in the world, but if I don't ever use any of my tools, I can't build no house. I can't create no radio. I can't do anything if I have these tools and I don't use them. So that is what this whole program is about. First, it's about articulating what these principles and visions, and later on we'll get them and extract them down to the different laws. But then the intellectual part of it is great. I mean, I can sit here and philosophize with the best of them. However, I need to be able to take these and, as Ernest said, activate them in the laboratory of my own life. And as a true scientist of religious science, you got to have your lab book. You call it a journal, you can call it whatever. I call it the lab book. And you have to begin to take notes and be observant to understand when I do A, B happens. When I don't do A, C happens. Or however you choose to draw up that diagram to begin to understand how these principles, visions, laws work in your life. Back to the foundation of what we're talking about, to accentuate and activate your spiritual magnificence. You can't, as they say, if you take life casual, you will end up a casualty. And none of us wants to do that. We want to take life full on with gusto and divine ideas to move us forward.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. So, in many ways, folks, it comes down, and this also sounds rather cliche when you say it, but and it's funny. Z and I were commenting before the show. Why is it that so many people feel it necessary to tell us who they learned this stuff from? As a comment on Facebook, I learned this from Kennedy Schultz back in da, da, da. Okay, I'm less interested in who you learned this from than I am in how you're using this today.
Yes.
Show me how you're using these principles. How are they working in your life? Because you can be trained by the greatest master in the world. And if you never use the training you have, then you're never going to excel. You're never going to succeed at what it is. So we get asked a lot, what's the difference between somebody who uses these principles and gets what they want and somebody using these principles who doesn't seem to be able to get what they want? And it's a matter of the training.
Right.
It's a matter of how skilled you are at using that training. So do you spend time every day practicing? I guarantee you the top golfers in the world swing a club every single day. The top baseball players in the world swing a bat, throw a ball. I got that glove on every single day, no matter what. The great metaphysicians, what they did differently is they used these principles every day.
Yeah. And use them with awareness, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be in the habit of rotely doing things just because at some point, I know for myself, it has definitely happened that, I've made a statement of who I am and what I am. And so there's sometimes, just quite frankly, I'm tired, which is a normal ebb and flow of life. But I still sometimes, when I'm not centered, I feel I gotta put on something to fool somebody. And I'm only fooling myself.
Right.
We have to begin to take it seriously. And Kenny Rogers said it the best. You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, right? And in the sense that you have to understand at the grand picture, we're in a flow of life and there's ebb and flow. So you don't get down on yourself that day or that's couple of days that you don't use the principle. You look at it in a different perspective. That was my recharge day. I'm back on the horse tomorrow. I'm going back to do whatever it is I do to keep myself highly motivated in this spiritual life. And so that's what we begin to understand as we go through these principles. We understand that this is not trying to see how fast I can go from 0 to 60. Right? I might blow my engine by the time I might get there, but by 60, boom, my whole thing is blown. It's like I want to have my ebb and flow to get to the point where my spiritual magnificence, where your spiritual magnificence is a beacon. It's always there. If you ever seen a lighthouse, that lighthouse goes around. Now it's not always shining in one direction. It comes around, but it becomes a beacon because it shows a consistency and a pattern that says this is safe harbor. And that's what we're looking to do as we create this world that works for everyone.
Yeah. As you're sharing it, I'm reminded that this concept of a world that works for everyone is about as difficult to explain as God. We were sharing about, right? And we shared about that. No one's ever seen electricity. No one's ever seen gravity. But through our experience, we've learned to believe in them, and we've
and,
learned to,
and respect it.
yeah, and respect it, and be responsible about it. And the same is true for God. We've never been able to see it, but we come to an understanding, we come to a belief, we come to that place where we recognize that it's operating, we believe in it, and we respect it.
Yeah.
And now we get to take that into form. And I don't know exactly what a world that works for everyone looks like. I know what a world that works for me looks like. And I believe for the most part, I know what a world that works for Z looks like, at least in this relationship I do. All
Mm-hmm.
right. But I don't, it's like I have to just be in that place of saying, we can do this without knowing how in the world we're going to do this.
Right. Right. It's like, that brings to mind this whole statement, and I can't remember it exactly, but it was a statement that Dr. Martin Luther King made. He says, "You have to take the first step on the step, even though you don't see the second step. But when you do that, the second step will appear." And so, as you go through this step by step evolutionary process to open up to your magnificence, the step will appear. As they say, a way will be made out of what seemingly is no way.
Right.
But we step forward with faith and understanding, just like we don't jump off buildings because we don't understand gravity, or we cut the light switch on and we expect electricity to be there. In that same manner, we have to step forward in this idea of our greatness individually and collectively. And that when we can step into that principle, then things will happen. This world that works for everyone will begin to unfold right before our eyes.
Yeah. So, right here we are, folks. This last piece of this puzzle today of today's exploration, a world where each and every person discovers and therefore implies uses. We're up to the point of using it. So we're using our personal power to create an individual life that works within the world that works for everyone. It is the both and.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do the individual work, I believe, well, mostly simultaneously. I'm doing my individual work and I'm doing work out in the world. And when something happens and something rubs wrong and something doesn't look the way it should, or it looks a little different than we think it should, well, that's my time to do some more work, right? And not lose sight of the fact that your participation
Mm-hmm.
in this thing called life, well, it's non-negotiable, really. Your participation is required.
Well, and you're going to participate, as they say, willingly or unwillingly, but you're going to participate, right?
Right.
And that brings to mind this whole idea of how we navigate this whole platform, this whole experience called life. And you'll hear me refer to Alan Watts often because I think he had such a great perspective on the globalness and the oneness and the wholeness of life. He makes the point that says we have to look at the world in oscillation from a microscopic to a macroscopic to a normal vision, because each one of those gives us a different perspective. And if I get too far down in the micro stuff, I get real clear about the details, but I can lose my direction because I don't know where I'm going. And if I got this 20,000 foot level, I see exactly where I'm going, but the details get all messed up. And if I stay at it just at the normal vision level, well, I can become afraid or activated. I mean, there's a whole range in that moment because I can't see the details of how to get out, nor can I see the vision of where I'm going. But if we can oscillate between those, i.e., if we can step into the flow of life and go up and down this spectrum, this spiral, this polarity, if you will, of life, then we can begin to see all things being possible because I can adjust myself, my vision, my thoughts, my actions to the proper perspective when I look at it from a true perspective wherever I am on it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, it's and that, as we were talking before, Robert, the one thing about this process of understanding our spiritual magnificence, it's a circular spiral effect. So at
Yeah.
some point, the conversation just goes round and round and round. But ideally, we are moving up that spectrum and we are one notch above. So we really begin to see over time the spectrum of life and understand at the lower and higher level, and we can act accordingly.
Yeah. Exactly. Ooh, see, life is so good. Hey, folks, we're going to take a quick break and say thank you to a couple of sponsors and let you know just a little bit more about who the New Thought Media Network is. We're going to be back in 1 minute. Hang tight.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And see, folks, that's our vision of how we create a world that works better that works for everyone. That's where New Thought Media Network feels we are uniquely qualified to play and to bring forward uh, what we trust is going to be inspiring media, entertainment, different commentary, different musical programs. I do want to let you know the radio station has received a major musical uplift in the last few days. We've got all new playlists, and the website is about ready to be launched on the first of the month. Going to make it a lot easier for you to access our broadcasts and to access the radio stream with just a few clicks of a button. So we want to let you know that all that's coming. All right, let's get back into this. Z, we've got time for just a little bit more, our final thoughts here today. If you are just joining us, folks, we are exploring the Centers for Spiritual Living Global Heart and the Global Heart Vision. And today, what we've been talking about is the third principle, we innocence, and discovering the creative power of thought. A world where each and every person discovers his or her own personal power and ability to create an individual life that works within a world that works for everyone.
Yeah, and while we were on that break, this thing popped into my head. Now I wanted to grab it and read it. It's from the Science of Mind textbook, and it's in the glossary. And it talks about this great discovery, and it reads like this. It says, "The greatest discovery ever made was the discovery of the creative power of thought, because upon this hinges our entire evolution. The ability to affirm, to say I am, to be conscious of one's relationship to the universe is not only a guarantee that we live and are some part of the universe, it is also a proclamation of the universe, since the only knowledge of God can have most come through our consciousness as human beings."
Mhm.
And again, that speaks to this this interrelationship between man and the divine, or woman and the divine, and that when we can align ourselves, the other day Robert and I were talking in terms of this alignment. For those of you who know how to drive a stick shift, and you have to manually shift your gears, right? If you don't push that clutch and get that gear in the perfect alignment when you go from first to second or second to third or whatever it is, there's going to be some jerking going on. And if you can't get that thing together, pretty soon you're going to burn out your clutch, right? And so that's how we want to look at this relationship with the divine, i.e., ourselves and our fellow mans, to create this one world, if you will, is where when we can get in alignment, there may be a little transition between gear one and gear two. And as you know, if you drive the stick, it depends on your ability to adjust that clutch. But when you're able to stay in alignment, the car runs smooth. It goes up hills better. It goes down hills better. It picks up speed when it needs to. And that's what we're looking at here in this time that we find ourselves in. How do we understand the terrain that we're in and know when to speed up, slow down, downshift, upshift, and create this life? Sounds like a broken record that works for everyone.
For
Because
everyone.
that's what this principle is about. Work for everyone.
Yes. Yes. And right now I'm praying that the clouds work on my behalf, move in front of that sunbeam, and allow you all to see me again. So, but and for me, that's a big part of all of this is we learn these principles. We know we've got to be practicing these principles, and I take life, I take life very seriously.
Mhm.
And I take the humor in life very seriously as well. And I mean, if we want to talk about it, an instant demonstration, all I said was I pray the clouds move over and get rid of the sunbeam, and look at that, there it happens. I take this stuff very seriously. I experience demonstrations in my life because I know that this power works. I've proven it again and again and again in my life and the lives of people that have requested prayer from me. And the truth is, I know you can do this too.
Mhm.
There are no limits to your power. There are no limits to how you may express this into the world. There are no limits to who you can be
Yeah.
in this
And
thing called life.
yeah, and you bring up this point. When we look at the spiritual teachers throughout history, I would dare say, and the one who said it most famously is Jesus, where he said, "These things I do, you can do these and more."
Right.
And that more comes from because he realized that the evolutionary process of where he was and where we would be a grander, greater, more evolved point of understanding how thoughts work and creative processes and co-creation and all of this. That's why he said, "You can do these things that I do and more." Because as we begin to unfold the understanding of the principles and God itself, the thing itself, as Ernest would call it, became more and more open, accessible, and activated as we evolved as human beings.
Yeah. Hmm. Ooh, we could go on, folks. And we know we'll be back next week. Hey, but we do have a big favor to ask before then. If you wouldn't mind, do us a favor, jump over to our YouTube page, youtube.com/she/my name. And we really need you to subscribe to our page. Now, I don't use that word need very often either, but we really could use your support in just hit the subscribe button. If you want to hit the bell so that you get notifications every time the channel goes live, please do.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get to 1,000 subscribers on that page so we can embed these programmings on our own website. And so we can expand the reach of this mighty network of New Thought Media Network. If take just a moment, head on over there. We'll actually copy this as well, put it in the show notes or in the it should be in the show notes, and we'll put it in the comments as well. We would really appreciate the subscription. Get us a little closer to that next level of exposure that we need. And with that, please do also remember we have our fall fundraiser has started. We are having a big event on November 20th. Lots of musicians, lots of speakers. You can get a chance to learn a whole bunch more about how we got to where we are today and where we intend to go in 2021. It's called Launch 2021, November 20th. And we have a fundraiser that's going with that. It is already open and available if you'd like to grab a coffee mug or a mouse pad, perhaps some other type of merchandise, sweatshirts, and all that kind of stuff. Please check out our fall fundraiser over, and that website's going across the bottom of your screen. It's also in the notes of today's show. So,
and you know, I just want to add to that too. Please, you know, my whole thing is tell a friend to tell another friend to come on and join us in this program. And please, 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 your comments, your questions, your interaction with us at any level you feel comfortable is much appreciated, because one of the cornerstones of this program is to begin an active conversation of, as the program says, New Thought Today, a religious science perspective, and how we put it in action, how we begin to have a conversation of making these principles work so that we don't need to say anything about them. When we walk by, the vibration and the frequency will be so high, people will notice it. They will look at our lives and how we handle problems and how we handle success and relationships and failures and all these things that make up life. So we can say, this is an example of what it takes to be successful, to understand our spiritual magnificence, take our place in the symphony of life, and have it work for everyone. Everybody gets a part. At some point, everybody going to get a solo. And so we just going to do what we do to make that happen. But we really want your input on topics. What do you think of the show? What you want more of? What you would like to see? And it's going to help us create a better and better show.
Yes. Amen. Everybody solos. I like that idea. So great. All right, folks. I think one last thing. We do want to let you know, if you enjoy what you're experiencing here, Rev Z and I have another show that we do together. This one's on Friday mornings, 7 a.m. Friday mornings, Ministers Talking Shit. And that's a half-hour show. It's a bit, we really don't plan for that one. We plan for this one. That one, we jump in a room and we talk about whatever's going on in the world and whatever is up in our hearts and whatever it is that we think you might benefit from. So join us again on Friday morning, 7 a.m. Mountain Time, for that program as well. All right, we're going to say one more quick thank you to our sponsors, and we are out of here. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back again next week, 2 p.m. on Tuesdays, right here on the New Thought Media Network. Until then, peace and blessings.
New Thought Radio, music from all your favorite New Thought artists. From Jamie Lula, Karen Drucker, Gary Lynn Floyd, Ricky Byers, Daniel Nahmod, Eddie Watkins Jr., and many, many more. 24/7 New Thought Radio. Positively inspiring.